Hi. Everything necessitatively, there's that word again. Ancient Greek word for it would be ananke, yeah, or tolma. It doesn't really translate as that, but it kind of loosely translated that. Everything in nature must be tied together intrinsically. Yeah, there's no such thing as physics versus metaphysics. In a more advanced culture, intelligent people in some far-off distant world would know that metaphysics and physics are one thing. Everything must be tied together. What about the fact, and I don't know, top three words, probably number one word for me that I despise is the word meditation. The thing that people conceive of in meditation, yeah, is one thing. What it is completely different. I don't use that word because, there's no ancient Sanskrit word for meditation, nor is there an ancient Pali word for meditation. They talked about sati, smriti, recollection, apophaticism, anamnesis, synthesis, theurgy. These are specific things. They're actually all kind of one and the same thing. Sati, loosely translated as recollection, but it doesn't mean recollecting what you ate yesterday. It literally means recollecting, remembering what you can't remember. And I have no love of Zen whatsoever, but there's even an old Zen saying, which is accurate, kind of like a broken clock was right twice a day, is what was your face before you were born? This is a really, really, really crude, thumbprint on what the word sati means. It doesn't mean recollection, as is conventionally conceived by basically anybody. You hear recollecting, it's like I can't recollect anymore. I can't remember. Talking about conventional consciousness, about being able to remember an empirical fact. But in the case of field theory, and in the case of the word concentration, let's just talk about concentration, because there's two different types of concentration. In the case of relational to liberation, relational to the goal of theurgy, Pali word vimutta, or in Sanskrit vimukta, or in nibbana, suvimutta chittasa nibbana. The thoroughly liberated chitta means nirvana, Bhava nirodha nibbana. The subjugation of becoming, and becoming, of course, is modulation, means nirvana, What's the one in Sanskrit? For you to say tattvamasi, full realization, or aham brahmasmi, say yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Means the same thing in the Pali. Let's talk about two different types of concentration. But very briefly here, in talking about field theory, I'm actually getting to the core of this video. Just bear with me just for a minute or two, even less than that. The center of gravity, there's no, say this was, the Earth, and here's an asteroid hurtling towards Earth, right? So, there's the center of gravity. Well, actually, gravity has no center, because if you go to the center of the Earth, the phenomenon that we call gravity doesn't exist. Same is true, not my opinion, fact, of a magnet. The center of a most powerful magnet on Earth, there is no magnetic flux. At the center of gravity and the center of magnetism, there are not those things. This is the reason why gravity doesn't have a center. It has a point, but the point of gravity is actually ab extra, outside of that object. And it's always counterspatial. The point of magnetism is also too counterspatial, because magnets, there's no such thing as magnetic attraction, which I've said in countless videos. They're actually not accelerating towards one another, they're actually accelerating to a point. The point that's mutually between the two, the lowest pressure mediation between both. So, people talk about concentration. Let's talk about the good type of concentration. The other type is not bad, because this is how people will fight with you, meaning me or anybody else that is logically and intelligently and wisely grounded in these things, and you can actually intelligently discuss them. Because if you can't intelligently discuss it, let's be honest with each other, girlfriend. If you can't intelligently discuss it, you probably don't know much about it, right? There we go. I'm trying to flip my glasses down. Because this is what people say, well, I do meditation, and I burn incense, and I feel so much calmer after a stressful cycle. This is true. This is true. They can stick you on a Thorazine drip and an adult diaper and have you watch the Cartoon Network for the rest of your life, and man, you'll be the least stressed out, the calmest person on planet Earth. But that's nothing to do with the goal that is supposed to be liberation. That's not theurgy, that's not synthesis. Well, it makes me feel better. This is true. You see, I'm agreeing with these people. I feel so much better. It works. What do you mean? Well, let's define work. You still completely identify with that thing you see in the mirror, right? The psychophysical. And I'm getting to the point of concentration here very, very, very quickly. I promise you. You still identify with that thing in the mirror, that psychophysical entity. Isokaya namisata. That's the most repeated phrase in the Pali Nikayas. The Pali Nikayas are basically like 100 Bibles all stacked on top of that much information. Not 100, actually pretty close to 100. That's a lot. I've been through all of them, many, many counts. No form of liberation ontology. Yeah? What's a liberation ontology? Well, Advaita Vedanta taught liberation ontology. Plotinus taught liberation ontology. In the Greek, the word would be epistrophe. Yeah? You say liberation, you say epistrophe. Who cares? Plotinus taught it. Original Buddhism taught it. The Upanishads taught it. Yeah? Liberation. That's the actual goal. That's doing those things has no connection. I feel so much better. Yes, you do. There's a lot of things that make you feel better. But that's not based in wisdom. It's based in calming your mind. It's based in extracting yourself just a little bit, but still completely identifying with that flesh suit that you see in the mirror. Flesh suit, meat suit? Meat suit's better. Meat suit's a whole lot better. So there's two types of concentration. The one's laser focus, mental agitation focus. You've seen people. You can even see they'll show monks that are actually got steam floating off of their head. They're literally, laser focused, and you can see that they're just like pumping iron inside their mind. Laser focus, right? What's wrong with that? They're so calm and peaceful. There's a lot of things that can make you calm and peaceful. But my question to you is that in any way connected to liberation? Is that disobjectification with the meat suit that you see in the mirror when you brush your teeth? So let's get down to the two types of concentration. One's not bad. It's just not a methodology relational to wisdom and ultimately to liberation. Liberation of what, by what, from what. Because if you don't think that there is a subject that is liberated, then you, by definition, cannot believe in metaphysical liberation. It's completely impossible. There is no soul. Well, I'm glad you think that. That's wonderful for you. But there's no such passage in the Upanishads. Advaita Vedanta, there ain't no passage in Buddhism original. That's a horrible word, too, by the way. Buddhism is a term that didn't even exist until the 16th century. Buddhism! Nothing other than a neo-Sramanic movement. How do you like my different voice I use there? It's kind of a statement of ignorance. There's Buddhism! It's like, what are you talking about? Are we talking about pre-sectarian, the original article, or are we talking about a latter-day sect based upon Guru Bada Bing's teachings? Because, but that's a matter for another discussion. So getting on to concentration, right? The other one type of concentration is extraction. Call it synthesis, apophaticism, theurgy, the goal of anamnesis, sati, yeah? Different kinds of concentration. There's two different ways to concentrate, right? So let's actually get into these terms and talk about, because when people are concentrating, they're sitting there focused. I'm meditating. You're sitting on a zafu or a zabuton, those little fancy meditation cushions, blank out their mind. Well, isn't that nice? There's a lot of ways you could blank out your mind. Lobotomy. Excuse me. I had a little cough there. But they have nothing to do with disobjectification from the meat suit, right? Concentrating. You can see them. You can see they're just burning the wood between their ears. And they're like, they'll get out of it, and the incense stick is burned out, and it's like, oh, I feel so much more peaceful. And it lasts for a day or two, and they got to do it again. Maybe it not even last a day. It might only last an hour or two. That's wonderful. That's nice. That's concentration. Yeah, but is that the concentration? We would make a gold analogy here, like gold mining, because the ancient scriptures of both the Greeks and the Indians are really apt in using the gold analogy. Get to that in a second. But you can't think your way out of a thinking box. So they'll sit there and concentrate, burn the wood between their ears. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're concentrating. They are, but is that the concentration spoken of in the Upanishads, in the Upadisa Sahasri, the Vivachudamuni, in the Nikayas? I mean, none of that is mentioned in the Digha Nikaya, Majjhima, Samyutta, and Gotara Nikaya, Kodaku Nikaya, the Udana, Iributaka, Suranapada, Dhammapada, and the Pali. None of that's mentioned as a basis or grounds of liberation. In other words, building up or heaping up wisdom. Because wisdom and the self are one and the same thing. And I don't mean the self in the mirror. I mean the transcendental self, which is ab extra to the body. Because this meat suit is a tuner. Empirical consciousness is the consubstantiality of spirit and body, right? And that is, of course, a living person. You know, that's life. Life is the consubstantiality of spirit and matter, right? Undeniably so. Said every ancient Platonist, Pythagoras, Plotinus, the Upanishads, they all said the same thing, of course. And it's undeniable doctrinally, but it's also, too, undeniable logically so. You know. True concentration of theurgy is, of course, the entire becoming of being self-reflexive. In other words, the removal of the primordial attribute of agnosis, which is transcendental to the psychophysical body, because what is the basis for embodiment? There is no prima causa original sin in monistic metaphysics, be it Greek or Indian, or any logical form of monistic metaphysics, other than Greek or Indian, which I can't, with the Egyptians also too, we don't need to get into that one. So, meditation, of course, 99 times out of 100 is existential concentration, or merely cutting off of mentation, thought process, burning. They'll actually, because you can't think what these people do. They try to think their way out of a thinking box. They're sitting there, and the best that they'll do is they'll cut off discursive thought. They'll blank out their mind, and they're seeking emptiness. Of course, there's no such thing as emptiness. Emptiness is a qualifier. X is empty of Y. The North Pole is empty of palm trees. There's no such thing as emptiness. They'll sit there, they'll think really hard about not thinking. They blank out their mind. It's like, I feel calmer, more peace to the world. They're like, yes, you do. But are you in any way disobjectified from that meat suit? So I'm not going to call that the bad kind of concentration, but when it comes to relational positioning, compared to the liberation ontology, what is meant by denotatively theurgy, apophaticism, vimutta, it is the bad form of concentration. Because when you think of concentration, just please be honest with me, for God's sakes. Yeah, I said for God's sake. For God's sakes, for 5 seconds, be honest with me. You think of concentration, you're thinking about this meat suit, focused like a laser. Admit it. If you're not going to be honest with me, at least be honest with yourself. Yeah. That's concentration that people think of. Meditation. They'll even concentrate on something that is completely non-existent. It is purely conceptual, like emptiness. I'm going to concentrate on... They'll even say that, I'm going to concentrate on emptiness. What? There's no such thing as emptiness. No such thing as emptiness, by the way. Neither you nor anybody on this earth, alive or dead, can reify the word emptiness, because emptiness is not a thing. Emptiness doesn't exist. I love it when people say, I experienced emptiness. Oh, really? Yes. I was just in it. Really? Yeah. So you were in it, right? Yeah. So it wasn't empty. What? You said you were in emptiness. That's right, yeah. So you were in it, but it was emptiness. It couldn't be emptiness by definition because you were there and you remember being there. But emptiness by true definition, which doesn't exist, would have no attribute at all, because if emptiness had an attribute, then it wouldn't be emptiness. But since you remember being there, you remember an attribute of emptiness because you were in it. And since you were in it, as you say, then it wasn't empty. They don't like it when you say stuff that is really sensible and logical, because true metaphysics is highly logical. It is highly sensible. It is not illogical. It is not like white lighter, poofery, poof, craziness. I'm going to tape a crystal to my forehead and open up my 5th chakra. It's not like that kind of, it's nothing even close to that. So yeah, we're getting to genuine concentration here. So, and I'm writing a booklet on retroduction, and that's what retroduction, part of it anyway, is about. So, embodiment, of course, is modulation, just like a radio, yeah, because all a radio does is it actually tunes a signal that has modulation. A signal, by definition, has frequency. It is a modulation which is tunable, because that's all a radio is, for example. It is an energy modulation decoder. That's what a radio actually is. Life is, of course, the consubstantiality between matter and spirit. That is life, and your consciousness is the byproduct result of those two working in consubstantiality in harmony, with the logos of both. So embodiment is modulation. Modulation, of course, is agnosis. Yeah, the frequency or wavelength of one spirit, the primordial agnosis, which has no center. It's really important, like I said, the center, there's no center of gravity. There's a point of gravity, but it's always counterspatial. A magnet has no magnetism at its center. The point of gravity, of magnetism is in counter space. You say in counter space or of counter space. Same is true of two mutual mass acceleration. Genuine concentration is not in this body. Let me repeat that because it's so incredibly important. Genuine concentration that is based in liberation, vimutta, with wisdom. They're all one and the same thing. You say liberation, wisdom. You know, the fulfillment of wisdom, of course, is liberation and vice versa. Is not in this body. Just think about that for a second, because nobody on this earth has said that in any book or in any YouTube video or otherwise. Yeah, let's just link those three things together, because Mother Nature is really simple. As I've said, she's a hairy armpit chick with muddy feet and dreadlocks, and she doesn't have a calculator. Really, really simple. There is no such thing as a center of gravity. If you're able to go to the center of Earth, there is no phenomena we call gravity. You'd be floating. The center of a magnet, there is no magnetic flux. There is no center within the meat suit of concentration, whether in the mind or anywhere here. I'm going to focus on my third chakra. Isn't that nice? The point of liberation, which is not inside this body, is, of course, in counter space. The disubjectification, Yisokaya namisota, the most repeated phrase. The via negativa. Objective negation leads to subjective synthesis. What do you think? You can look up these terms on dictionary.com. Well, not dictionary.com. Look up these terms anywhere on Google. Apophatism, via negativa, neti, N-E-T-I, and then repeat that again. Look up neti. Look up apophatism. Look up via negativa. These are all one and the same thing. Different cultures use different words for the same thing. The point of liberation is ab extra to this body. There is no magnetism in the center of a magnet. There is no gravitational phenomena in the center of a mass of gravity. Gravity has a vector. Magnetism has a vector. Liberation has a vector too, but it does not have a center in this meat suit. The point of liberation is ab extra to this meat suit. What do you think neti or vita negativa is about? If it's all about psychophysical negation, what do you think its point is? Not a center, a point. The point of gravity is always ab extra to the so-called gravitational mass. The point of magnetism is always ab extra to the field that we call the toroidal field of a magnet. The same is true of liberation. It is always ab extra to the meat suit. There is no liberation in, of, or about, or with a Cartesian coordinate in the meat suit. But that's what people are doing. They're trying to think their way out of that thinking box. And by God, I'm going to think so hard, I'm going to think my way out of the thinking box, or the thinking prison. So, what do you think true concentration is? People think like turning on the light bulb, or turning the light bulb into a laser, in the case of bad concentration. People think of, I'm going to turn the light bulb into a laser, where it becomes self-reflexive because a laser is a point source field emission, coaxial circuit of light. What about turning the light switch off? Let's not think about, because this is energy expenditure, right? The ether perturbation modality, specifically the coaxial circuit that we call light, is burning energy, right? Your electric bill kind of proves that, doesn't it? It's burning energy, so it doesn't matter if it's a light bulb or a laser, you're burning energy. And if you're burning energy, you're doing the opposite of what liberation would be about, which would be about flipping off the light switch, because I got a cabin in the deep woods. There ain't no electricity there, and as a result, I never ever get an electric bill. Isn't that neat how that works? No energy expenditure, unless I'm hauling wood, but that's me expending energy. But I'm still expending energy because I eat food, then I move wood to the stove, right? No electricity, no electric bill at my cabin. So they think about turning, the light bulb into a laser. I'm going to focus. I'm going to turn the light bulb that is my mind into a laser. That's what they do. Please be honest with yourself, if not with me. What about just turning the switch off? And that does not mean death. That doesn't mean, You know, I'm going to end the meat suits. Don't take that implication, because I'm certainly not talking about that. I'm talking about the metaphysics of turning off the switch, complete disobjectification, with the thing that feeds off the power. I don't need that light bulb. I'm going to turn it off permanently. Light bulb, of course, or the laser, burn energy. So does the meat suit. True theurgy, of course, is turning off the switch, not meaning death, but removal, of course, of the false identification with the meat suit that you see in the mirror. This is a reference to what was called the dead man walking, where someone is still alive, but what they've done is they've died to the physical meat suit that they formerly saw themselves as. A gold analogy. People concentrated on finding gold. Some people spend most of their life trying to find gold, looking for gold. Where's the gold at? Blah, 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 blah. What about, and there's other people, they concentrate on extracting the gold. Like they've got all, you know, a mountain of rock with gold embedded in it, and then are, of course, working on extracting the gold. Because gold purification doesn't exist. Gold is gold is gold. It's always gold, isn't it? Yes. Some people say, you don't need to be liberated, you're already liberated. Which is an extremely, Zen is really fond of saying that. You don't need to be liberated, you're already liberated. No, you're not, because what is potential is not actual. The removal of primordial agnosis. Objective negation. You need to think about that passage. Not a passage, actually. It's my statement. That no one else said it except for me. Objective negation leads to subjective synthesis. Synthesis is just another word for the culmination of theurgy, the culmination of wisdom. You know, the principle of vimutta, vimoksha. You say, you know, vimoksha or vimutta. Most people don't know Pali. They know Sanskrit words, vimoksha. Gold is always gold. But what is potential is not actual. You should look up these words, and there's plenty of books you could download too, and find on neti, via negativa, apophatism, objective negation. Just think about linking those two things. As I mentioned, the center of gravity. Yeah, there's no center of gravity in a so-called gravitational mass. There is no center of magnetism, because at the center of a magnet, there is no magnetic flux. That's not my opinion. That's a hardcore fact that you can test with a Gauss meter. There is no center of liberation anywhere in this body, no matter how hard you concentrate. Concentrate, there's that word again, concentrate. I feel so much better. I think you're a liar. I don't like the word meditation because it is completely aspecific. It doesn't tell you what the genuine ancient masters taught. What did they teach? Different words meaning the same thing. Theurgy, apophaticism, yeah? Synthesis, via negativa, neti. The Pali word is anatta. If there were no liberant, yeah, I said liberant as a word you probably never heard before, meaning the soul. If there were no soul, you would never say, this is not the soul, that's not the soul. You say, there's no soul. What about, no soul. What about, no soul? There are hundreds and hundreds, and I know every one of them. I do. I got a digital search engine for ancient Pali, Romanized Pali. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. But this is not the soul, that's not the soul, that's not the soul, that's not the soul, that's not the soul. Isukai, Rupanata, Vedanata, Samanata, Sankaranata, Vinyanata, Namarupanata. All these things that are not the soul. That is via negativa. Objective negation leads to subjective sin. That's not knowing it. Like, knowing it is liberation? No, of course not. Merely know, you have to actually actualize it. Actualization, of course, is via wisdom. There are two different types of concentration. When I use the word concentration, you are thinking, you said concentration, I know what that is. And 99 times out of 100, actually 999 times out of 100, when I say concentration, I know the concentration taught by Adi Sankara, Sri Sankaracharya in the Upadisahasraya, the Vivachudamuni, or the Principal Upanishads, or in the Nikayas. But you're thinking of concentration of these guys. Oh, I'm going to think my way out of a thinking box. Oh, you can smell the wood burning between their ears. Oh. burn the incense, sit on the Zafu's Abutan. Concentrating. Unfortunately, that English word concentration is correct, but it is not the concentration taught. Because you, like everybody else, thinks, and let's just, the last thing in this video, thinking of physics. This is a huge, let's say this is a moon or a star or whatever it is. It's the center of gravity, extreme gravitational acceleration. At the center of that, gravity has no center. It has a point. Gravity specifically has a vector, but the point of gravity, when talking about gravity, you have to talk about two or more objects, right? Doing this number, right? The point of gravity is always outside of the mass or the other mass, two or more objects, right? Has a point, but there is no such thing as the center of gravity. The center of concentration, just like gravity too, the point of gravity is counterspatial. The point of magnetism is counterspatial. The point of genuine concentration, of liberation, taught in the Nikayas, the Upanishads, Plotinus' epistrophe, look up the word epistrophe, is always counterspatial. In the absolute, you could say Brahman, you could say counterspace, I don't care what word you use. What words we use is completely irrelevant to Mother Nature and ultimate truth. If you use a different word, who cares? The point of liberation is always ab extra to that meat suit you see in the mirror. The point of gravity is always counterspatial. The point of magnetism, its center. Magnetism has no center. Counterspatial, because magnetism, of course, is a centrifugal force in motion, vector of the loss of energy or inertia as defined by the dielectric. All of these things are one and the same. Physics and metaphysics overlap each other. They are one and the same thing. Like talking about a coin. The head side and the tail side of a coin. Like, no, there's not. There's only the silver of the coinage. They're both one and the same thing. Just think about the center of things, yeah? By the way, no branch of science has ever defined a field yet. Yeah? But just think about that word concentration. Because when I say concentration, I know exactly what the hell I'm talking about. But you hear the word concentrate. Meditation, I do concentration. Yes, you do. But are we talking about the same kind of concentration? And the answer to that is, no, we ain't. Yes, I use the word ain't. No, we ain't talking about the same kind of concentration. I'm not going to call one bad. It fundamentally is bad relational to liberation concentration. Meditation, I concentrate. Oh, really? Is that in any way effectuated your growth in wisdom and disobjectification from the meat suit you see in the mirror? No! But it makes me feel better for a day or so. Sometimes a few hours. Someone's not going to like the way I talk in this video. They're going to say something like, you're an ass! I don't like you! You're so... It's like, the real question is, was I being logical and intelligent and consistent in this video? And the answer is yes, I was. That's all that's fundamentally important. Does that follow? Does that logically follow? Well, yes, it does. I don't like that guy, but it is consistent and logical. Yes, it is. Laxe veritas.